am taking my opening comments from a volume edited by Cable Newhouse called Lively Connections. And in the introduction, the editor, Newhouse, is wrestling with the nature of ethical culture and with the concepts that he feels are important for this. There's a tremendous amount of solid material here, and if you haven't got this book, it's available through our ethical culture organizations. It's called Intimate Encounters with the Ethical Movement in America, and it consists of a series of essays, some not too good, but some very profound ones by leaders of the ethical society. He says this: ethics, as interpreted by the ethical movement, is not a set of fixed absolute commandments or codes of morality. The issues of right and wrong are not so simple that they can be set at one time for all time, in one place for all the earth. Ethics is the attempt to nourish sensitivity, maturity of conscience, and moral judgment, to foster the growth which will transcend the moral codes of the past and move human relationships toward a more secure and just, a more liberating and creative way of life. As Felix Adler arrived at a formulation of what he believed was a flexible, progressive approach to a more ethical life, he expressed his thought in a positive direction. So act as to evoke the best in others and thereby in yourself. And this, by the way, if there is a creedal statement in ethical culture, this could be at least part of it. He held that we should treat every human being as having worth, intrinsic value in the self. But he did not assume that he had the authority to state this as a dogma or an absolute in ethics. An ethical philosophy called for an open-ended approach which would assure human beings freedom, diversity, and creativeness. Ethical wisdom would require insight and knowledge and logic. It would reflect the growing conscience of humankind. Although he was willing to stake his reputation and his life on the teaching that human beings should act in relationships as if every human being had worth per se, and although he was ready to make this proposition a central element in his approach to education, to social service, and to social action, he offered it not as a dogma, but as a principle to be tested for its validity. The wonder was that with all this learning and leadership in religion and philosophy and ethics, Felix Adler entitled his major work not The Ethical Philosophy of Life, but rather An Ethical Philosophy of Life. And as Newhouse says, for this I am sure we all thank him. It is a lesson in humility and the expression of his belief that no one leader or one group should ever think that they could achieve and impose a fixed and perfect formulation for the ethical movement. This struggle to be is what we're involved in, and what we have been involved in ever since this organization was founded here on the West Coast. And it will continue insofar as we commit ourselves to these basic principles of recognizing worth in ourselves and in others. If you'll notice the cartoon on the bottom of the page by Bill Watterson, you will see that Calvin, who is one of my favorites, if not one of yours, reflects the most primitive fear associated with this seasonal change we call the Wicker Solstice. Interestingly enough, when I saw this, I said his words are an echo from the distant past, when humans didn't know about the tilt of the earth as it journeyed around its little star that we call our sun. They knew nothing of the world revolving on its axis. They knew only what they could observe from their place in time and in space. They knew only that at this time of the year, the hours of daylight began to decrease. They were shortened, and darkness covered the land for longer and longer periods of time. They recognized the sun as a great power. Indeed, our early ancestors were very conscious of what some of our New Age people would call energy, power in the universe, things over which they had no control. And here was the sun that gave them warmth, gave them light, beginning to fade in strength, and darkness, which meant cold, lack of ability to see any distance, brightened only by the flickering feeble light of the stars and the moon, taking over more and more of the hours of their existence. And the haunting question is the one that Calvin raises. What if the powers of darkness overcame light? It's a question that has never lost its implication as we translate it into moral terms, ethical terms, or whatever. What if the sun was obliterated and there was no more daylight? So what these people did, encouraged by their priestly leaders, was they kindled Yule logs. They lit candles to encourage the sun, to help the sun regain its strength and its energy. And believe it or not, each year they were successful. Because after they did this, the hours of daylight slowly began to extend, and the powers of darkness were pushed back, and all was well with the world. But apparently, from what we can find in our earliest study of this epoch, this period of time in the revolution of the earth around the sun, there was great fear that somehow it might not work. Somehow the power of the sun might be diminished, and somehow the power of darkness may be increased. Now, we look at this and we say that this was the era of naivete, a time for magical thinking. You light a fire, you produce the heat and light and so on. This was before the birth of science. What has this got to do with us today? Well, as you know, we commemorate ancient rites in modern times. In Jewish homes and synagogues, and right down the street very shortly, Hanukkah is being celebrated. And this Jewish feast is related to some wonderful and exciting and powerful history, but it's also accompanied by some rather fascinating religious fiction. The history is that the time when where this festival finds its roots, back in the beginning of just before the beginning of the Christian era, the Jews were being pressured by two generals who had worked under Alexander the Great, because at his death his kingdom was divided among his generals. Ptolemy was in Egypt, pressing up toward Palestine, and in the area we now call Syria was Antiochus Epiphanes. Both Greeks, both interested in spreading Greek culture, and at the time when the Maccabean story, which is associated with Hanukkah, begins, the Greek zealot Antiochus Epiphanes was in control of Palestine. And he wanted to make everything Greek because this was the superior culture and so on. And what he demanded was conformity with Greek patterns. Devout Jews, of course, refused to obey his edicts. And he tortured them. Terrible tortures. And if you haven't read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, which unfortunately both Jews and Protestants have not included in their holy scriptures, but the Catholics have in theirs, and the Eastern Orthodox, you will read of the terrible persecution of those who held on to their faith. He insulted their religion. He burned their Torah scrolls. He killed those who had their infants circumcised. He ultimately provided the worst insult to Jewish religion by burning pig's flesh on the sacred altar. Now, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, the responses were what you might expect. Some Jews ran away. Some conformed. Go along, don't make ripples. But a small band that grew in size began a resistance movement under the leadership of Judas Maccabeus. And if you read the story, the temple was retaken. Stones of the altar had been fouled. They could not be used. They were set aside. And a new altar was built and rededicated. And at this point, what we call the religious fiction begins. And according to the legend, there was only enough oil for the menorah to burn one day. But miracle of miracles, it burned for 8 days, the oil being miraculously replenished. And that's why we have the 8-day festival of dedication, festival of lights, or Hanukkah, which the Jews are celebrating now. And of course, this fits in with the death and rebirth of the Son. These things are not happenstance. They're related. And what you do is you take a historical event and you give it new meaning, new significance, and new interpretation. And for Jews today, of course, it's a symbol of courage, of resistance, of the importance of their faith, and so on. The Christian festival, that'll be celebrated in a few days, is almost entirely mythological. Of course, there was a little Jewish boy named Jesus born. But the celebration of his birth, which didn't happen until the Christian church was well underway, well established, came about because, and this date was chosen as a rival to the Roman Saturnalia. No one knew when Jesus was born. No one cared. But when you began to call him the light of the world, the Prince of Peace, the new revelation, associated now with the rebirth of the Son, the rebirth of faith, and so on, we developed a Christian festival. So we have Christmas lights, all strung all around the place, on houses, on trees, and businesses, to remind us of the lights in the sky, stars that were there when Jesus was born. We give gifts to one another, not because the Romans did it at Saturnalia, but because the wise men brought gifts to Jesus. No, there's no real link to this thing, but it doesn't matter. Indeed, in one way or another, we justify our aiding and abetting of business organizations. We justify our stimulation of true greed in children and in adults. You know, what are you going to get me for Christmas? We provoke jealousies if we're not treated equally. He got a better present than I did. We assuage our guilt by giving gifts to make up for all the rotten things we've done during the year. And we do all this in the presence of a land of plenty that gives handouts to the poor at this particular time of the year, because we know that most of the time we ignore them. Now we pay attention to the unwanted, to the neglected, and to the forlorn. And for a moment, as you saw here, the light shines in the darkness. But when this period of time passes on, the darkness of hunger, neglect, will linger. It will still be there. And the struggle will continue between light and darkness. It isn't just one time of the year. It's daily, hourly, by the minute. Now, before I get into what I really wanted to say, I'm going to ask this. Why do these festivals stay? Why do we continue to do this thing? You listen on the radio and on television, they warn you we've just had a financial disaster in stocks and bonds. Will it affect Christmas buying? Heavens no. Go to the stores if you dare. The malls are crowded. People are buying. But why do we keep alive in this scientific age the myths of magical thinking? of oil lamps that continue to burn? Come on. Of guiding stars, of wise men, of miraculous births. The answer lies in part in nostalgia. They're part of our familial past. We want our children to share in the experiences that had meaning for us when we were wide-eyed little ones. In part, we observe these festivals because they belong to our cultural heritage. Hanukkah is uniquely Jewish, and Jews proclaim their Jewishness as they observe the festival of light. This is important. Christmas is uniquely Christian, and Christians proclaim their cultural heritage by observing the festival in different ways because they come from different parts of the world. In part, we continue these festivals and these customs because they are anchored in religion. And religious leaders always tend to exploit the festivals associated with their belief system. This is a time when Jews are expected to be Jews and go to Hanukkah parties and do things associated with the Festival of Lights. This is a time when Christians are expected to be Christians and do their Christmas thing. Indeed, the degree of religious exploitation depends only on the creative potential and imagination of the clergy. If you go down to Orange County, there's a glass cathedral. One of the greatest ego statements I have seen in a long time. And there, a spectacular presentation of the Christmas drama has been sold out for weeks. The pastor, and I've heard him on the air, will insist that this is done to make the Christmas message real, to proclaim the gospel and so on. More critical minds, of which I think I might be one, might view it in the same way that some of us have looked at Heritage Park, created by the Praise the Lord group, or as a Hollywood or Disneyland spectacular that brings in the curious, the devout, those who enjoy artistic entertainment, and this is quite an artistic presentation, I'm told, but as they come, they bring along with them their dollars. And that's what's really important. We're back to the time when every church in Europe that wanted to attract pilgrims with their money had some relic, the knee bone of a saint, or the shroud of Turin, or whatever it happened to be. This brought people there expecting miracles. Here we expect entertainment and fun, along with their money. Finally, we continue to observe these ancient festivals because of a desire for profit. Our business people hire professional promoters to market their wares, to slant their marketing toward seasonal festivals. The Jewish market, concerned with Hanukkah, has been rather slow. They haven't done the marketing as well as the Christians. I mean, you don't have the blue and white lights all around the place. But everything and every business, from Vaughn's to Rodeo Road, exploit Hanukkah and Christmas. This is a time when you do things and you get the market, whether it's selling matzos or whatever. You're in there to make a dollar. Now, the greatest marketing tools are, of course, radio and television. And if you're not weary of Christmas carols now, you will be by December 25th, I assure you, because you can't tune in anything without getting it. Sung not nearly as well as we did our little carol here today. Now, for those of us who are members of ethical culture and humanist groups, there's absolutely no way to escape these festivals. We're besieged by advertisements. Churches, social agencies beg for our dollars, for the poor and for the needy. The Salvation Army gets into a brouhaha with business malls over their little bells and their flat kettles collecting money for the poor, and so it goes on and makes the headlines. We're part of a cultural environment. All of us. We're not apart from it. We become involved. We hold at one of our members' homes a wonderful dinner to support the work that's being done for Para los Niños on Skid Row. It was tremendous, Shirley, it really was. Another member solicits clothing for the poor, and so on. And all we can do, because we are concerned, is applaud this statement of our involvement and our concern for other human beings. Some of us donate to charitable organizations, and because they can do what I as an individual, or you as an individual, or we as a group cannot do. They can help the victims of AIDS. They're organized to do this. They can provide toys for tots. They can give canned goods to various hospice organizations, and so on. And all of these acts of compassion and outreach are in accord with the highest ideals of the ethical culture tradition. We're concerned with ethical and moral growth, and with ethical and moral change. But we realize that these things cannot happen if there is no social change. What we do as individuals or as a group may be lost in the welter of charitable activities of this time of the year. That doesn't matter. Even our smallest efforts toward positive change, toward moral and ethical and social growth are important. In our own small way, we help to inch the weary, troubled world, enclosed in so much darkness, a wee bit further toward the highest humanistic ideals that we know, and towards what we might consider the light of understanding and ethical growth. What we do matters, no matter how small that action is. Our ancient ancestors had a point, and this is what I'm trying to make clear this morning. They had a point that might provide insight and have significance for us, even though we must transform it to meet our modern thinking. The powers of darkness are real. They go far beyond the solar energy that concerned our foreparents. The forces that would denigrate and despoil others are here, all around us. Christians personalize them in Satan or the devil. They made them external to human beings, acting on us. We know they are not external to human beings. They are within us. They are within humans, these forces of darkness. And they have been there since the beginning of our species. And they are marked by selfishness and greed and anger and hatred and bitterness and cruelty and impatience and so on. And they manifest themselves in the abuse of others, in the exploitation of others, in the hurting of others, in the acts of cruelty and destruction, in the deeds that maim and hurt and denigrate and dehumanize and despoil. And these are all human products, not some mystical devil. There is no devil. The evils are ours. We generate them. They are a part of our human heritage, and we carry them on. Now, there are times when, like Calvin in the cartoon, I begin to fear that the powers of darkness are overwhelming. Daily reports in the newspaper of international threats to human survival, of deceit and greed and corruption in our government, of brutality here at home and abroad, of poverty, starvation, worldwide, where we have food stored in bins that we don't know what to do with, of the impossibility of getting our outreach in food to the starving Ethiopians, of the problem of finding shelter for the homeless here in Los Angeles. And it goes on to include murder, suicide, and abuse, and violence, and there seems to be no end, no surcease. Powers of darkness are real. And when those feelings that sometimes the powers are overwhelming hit me, I remember that I'm an historian. And I can trace change in human behavior. We have now in our world virtually outlawed slavery. Not everywhere, but we have. Women are slowly beginning to receive new status in societies around the world. Not everywhere, but it's coming if we make it come. There is less exploitation of child labor than there once was. There are more human services. We have better medical facilities for most people, not all people yet. We lag behind this. To the north in Canada, every resident has free medical treatment for everything. We're moving slowly toward an ideal. Some of you will remember when John and Diane Larue were here talking about their Baha'i faith. That time Diane was working with Channel 18. She's now moved in to a program of coordinating medical services. She told me last night of a program that took aid to needy people in the Philippines, where they had a Boeing 707 made available to them free of charge, medical materials given by hospital groups, excess material they had, doctors going over, and of the thrill of even that one-time gesture of outreach that came to her and how it fitted in with her moral and ethical beliefs associated with the Baha'i faith. Now, what I'm trying to do is personalize this. You see, one of the interesting things we can do in ethical culture, we can talk about medical ethics, what the hospitals ought to do. That doesn't touch us unless we're involved. We can argue about business ethics, but unless we're involved, it doesn't touch us. The ethic I'm concerned about is what does it matter to me, and how am I involved personally? And one of the, again, historical roots that I'm reaching for is associated with personal and communal reckoning that is tied into the winter solstice. If you look back into the history of custom, you will find that in many cultures, the fact that the year was coming to a close, and by this time they knew that it would regenerate, that we were approaching the longest night of the year, this was a time for closure. This was a time to complete that year so that you can start the new year fresh. We do this January the 1st now. But in many cultures, throughout a nation, throughout a people, it was a time for an annual closure. One attempts to pay up all debts before the new year begins. One attempts to clear up all personal associations. If there has been a misunderstanding, you go and you reach out and you make contact with that person and say, I'm sorry, I want to start the new year right with you. If there's unfinished business, you finish it up now. Sometimes the change between the old, which is almost over, and the new is dramatized. For instance, there will be a tug of war between the older men of the village and the younger men. And of course, they hope that the younger men will win, although they respect the fact that the older men are still there making their contributions. We sometimes do that too. We have cartoons that depict the old year going off the stage with the side, the old man, the new year coming on, a little kid fresh little kid in diapers. This is the potential. The old year is past. What has been done is done. And what is ahead of us is the unpredictable opportunities for change and growth in the coming year. It's a time of closure and a time of hope and opportunity. And we can say to young Calvin here, if the world remains in darkness, it is because we do not permit the light to shine. If it becomes cold and inhospitable, It is because we have become that way. We are the world. We are the future. We are tomorrow. Just as we are the past. Just as we are yesterday. What we do, each one of us, in our own small way, moves out from us to touch others, and through them to affect the wider circles. And those of you who have thrown stones in a pond know how those circles widen and widen and widen until they break on the shore. What we do matters. We matter. And because we matter, we have a responsibility. Now, to what are humanists and ethical cultural humanists committed? According to our own creedal statements, if I could call them that, we are committed to help bring about a better world. The American Ethical Union has a peace committee because it is clear that a better world implies better human relationships. We cannot accept the Christian designation of Jesus as the Prince of Peace, and all we have to do is become a Christian. Because we know that in country after country, wars are being fought in the name of the Prince of Peace, in Ireland and so on. In fact, more wars have been fought in the name of Christianity and of religion than any other wars in history. Each ethical society must have a peace committee, or be reading about peace and doing something, become a peace center. And each ethical member must commit herself or himself to working toward peace. This means expansion of boundaries. In the ancient world, there were what we call topocosmic boundaries. Topos, place, cosmos, world. Place, world boundaries. You worked within a restricted area. This was your turf, to use the gang language. This was your area of operation. And when you crossed the boundary from your tribe to the next tribe, you better hope that the tribal relationships were friendly. We still have that. When you go from this country to another country, you have a passport to allow you to go through the door that permits entry. Our concerns are here in Los Angeles. This is where California, no, the United States, no, North America. Unless we expand our topocosm so that our concerns are not only this nation under God, but this world, it becomes our concern, we cannot work toward peace. We can't do it. When there's a battle in Northern Ireland, it's our battle. It's our war. When in Palestine, Arab and Jew and Christian struggle, Palestinians seeking freedom, Jews in Russia seeking freedom, it's our battle. It's our struggle. It's our fight. Wherever this battle occurs, we are not apart from it, we are a part of it. Because our horizons are broader. Our topocosm is not Los Angeles, or our community, or our street, or our home. It is the world. It has to be. This is our world. Or, as the song said, we are the world. We're the children of the world. And we are committed to human rights, here at home, and everywhere in the world. When Mr. Reagan challenged the Russian emissary concerning the rights, human rights in Russia and in Afghanistan, Mrs. Gorbachev asked Mrs. Reagan about the plight of the homeless in the rich, prosperous United States. Both are our concern. Both are our concern. When children in poverty areas are not being taught to read and write, when children in the third world countries are deprived of an education, because we believe in education, is one of the releasing powers, we are concerned. We are concerned with issues I have listed here on the handout. The AEU stands for world peace, human rights, public education, and so on, and a multitude of other things. This is our world. These are our concerns, because we are committed to helping to create a better world. This is in our dictum. This is in our statement. Obviously, I can't do this alone, nor can this group do this. We can't save the world. What a pompous notion that is. But we can work with and we can work through others who focus on specific problems. We can reach out to help in our own small way. We can seek to renew the light, to force back the powers of darkness, to create a new light and a new hope for the future. But the starting point is not talking about things that you can't do much about. The starting point is here with the self. And that's what I want to focus on for the next few minutes. As I said, there are those who use this period of the year to complete the year's work, to begin anew. And as the solstice turns, they are committed to creating better lives for themselves. That's okay. But as ethical culturists, our first concern has to be with hope. What may I hope for in 1988? Well, one thing I don't hope for, despite Christian prophetic voices, is the immediate return of Jesus to set up the kingdom of God. Nor do I hope for the coming of the Jewish Messiah. I'm like the rabbi in the Hasidic story. This particular rabbi, we're told, went to live in Jerusalem so that he'd be in the right spot in case the Messiah arrived. And on one particular morning, he heard the sound of a trumpet coming from the Mount of Olives. And if you know the tradition, this is where that was to signal the arrival of the Messiah. And what had happened was that a prankster decided to fool the old man. And he'd gone up into the mountainside, and in the still, and this is before automobiles, pre-automobile morning, he blew the trumpet. And the rabbi rushed to the window, opened to see the redeemed world, the new world of the Messiah. And what did he see? He looked down, he watched the driver beating a donkey. So he closed the window and he said this: I don't need to see anything else. So long as men still beat donkeys, the world is unredeemed. So long as men still beat donkeys, the world is unredeemed. And as the solstice passes with all Folderol, Hanukkah, and Christmas and so on, you and I will see no dramatic change. The world will continue to spin on its axis. Christians will clean up the rubbish from under the Christmas trees. Jews will put the Hanukkah menorah back in a box, and everything will go on. Poverty, war, abuse, human indifference. And so I can hope for no change unless I begin the change. What can I do? And this is the question that must haunt us. What can I do to lift the world? I'm no Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders. What can I do? I can begin with me. Where there is anger in me, let me bring peace. Starting with myself. Where there is impatience, let me bring patience. Starting with myself. Where there is misunderstanding, let me bring understanding, beginning not with somebody else, but with me. Men will still beat donkeys. And I will look out the window and I will see this. But I will start by being at peace with myself. I can change my aspect of life. I am not a victim solely of circumstance. I can be in charge of my life. I do not need a Messiah, or the returning Jesus, or the Holy Spirit. I am in charge of my own life. And I can and I will make changes. Not I will try to make changes. I can and I will make changes. For as a member of the Ethical Culture Society, I believe in deeds, not in words or creeds. And deeds start with me. Not with you, but with me, what I do. The hope of change. The hope for change. The hope for peace. The hope for understanding is a real hope. And I will help to bring it into reality. I will help to bring it about by beginning with me. Some of you will remember when I brought an 8th century BCE, before the Common Era, lamp to this lectern. We lighted it, and I gave each of you candles the way we had them up here at the front this morning in our living menorah, and you each took that with you to carry out into the world, to light the darkness in your own particular way. Well, the darkness is still there. But so are the lights in each of you. And because of these lights, in us and in others like us, change will come. Just as changes have come in the past because of committed people. Changes begin with individuals. Your light is the light of hope for the future. And without it, Calvin is right. Darkness will take over, and the world will become cold and lifeless and indifferent. The second point I'd like to make is this. Our light is an ethical ideal, and in its flickering beam is contained the highest hopes that humans have evolved. The potentials for so treating one another so as to bring out the best in both, the finest, the highest, and the noblest in both, in oneself and in the other. What else really matters? If I have no concern for the Russian worker or businessmen or for the intellectuals in Russia, then my ethical horizons are too small. What must be my attitude so that though I am separated by 10,000 miles from Russian man or woman or child, I may so act or speak or think that the noblest and the best may be engendered in them. If they are only the enemy, members of the evil empire, my vision is distorted and my ethical outreach is absolutely restricted before I start. We live in our society in a land poisoned by bigotry, and only as we embrace the wider family of humankind do we live up to our ethical culture. Now, what I'm saying is not a call for Jews to give up their Jewishness and for Christians to give up their Christianity and so on, or for Hindus to join the ethical culture society. We're not out to convert the world to a society. Either Felix Adler nor any of the others believe that. And Felix Adler didn't want everybody to become Adlerists. Our challenge is to so live that we can embody Edwin Markham's remarkable vision in that little fragment of a poem from Shoes of Happiness. You know it. He drew a circle to shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. Societal boundaries that say you cannot be with us because you don't believe this, you don't believe that, are there. Our circle embraces them all. They all belong to our human concerns. Adler's dream of men and women united, not on the basis of theology, not on the basis of creed or belief systems, but on the basis of an all-inclusive ethic that belongs to all, embraces all, and underlies all higher religions, is a dream that must come true. It has not yet been realized. Ethical societies, as you know, are composed of people who are no better or worse than the people who are not members of ethical societies. Some members come to us with their own portfolios. Some carry their own prejudices against persons of different status, or different age, or different education, or different sex, or whatever. Some ethical cultures, like those outside, are hard to live with. There was Rupert Brooks, the great Christian preacher, once was commenting on the saints. And Christians on earth are supposed to be saints as they become saints in heaven. And he wrote a little poem that read, "To live with the saints in glory, to live with the saints in heaven is bliss and glory. To live with the saints on earth is often another story." We are human. We're individuals. And we only can live part of the dream. And some of us may torture it into a nightmare for others. But there are those who are committed. And we're all part of that, to one extent or another, who strive daily to express in their lives the deep, supportive concern for others, who live lives devoted to reaching out and helping others, who seek to find within themselves, within their lifestyle, and within their immediate associations, ways of expressing the highest ethic of love and understanding and concern and caring and listening and patience, and of bringing out in the others the highest ethic in them. And these people are there when you need them. They're the lights that help us dispel the darkness. They raise their children to be decent human beings. They're livable as neighbors, and many of them are right here among us now. We are the light of the world, each of us, as we let that light shine. Now, in my closing words, I'd like to read some things that were written by a leader of the Ethical Culture Society who's dead, for whom I have only the highest memories and respect. Indeed, his last letter, which was not finished, was addressed to me. It was sent to me after his death. And this is Joseph Blau, a colleague and a very, very warm, concerned, and beautiful man. He is talking about some of the things that I'm trying to talk about today, only he says it perhaps much better. He says, "The current failure of nerve, which I am expressing and Calvin's expressing, the current failure of nerve will pass too in time. You and I may not live to see the turning of the tide of history. Historical trends have a notoriously long periodicity. Our children's children or their children may be the ones to witness the return from today's version of romantic supernaturalism to the sure knowledge that only by human hands working with human brains on the basis of the accumulated wisdom of humanity will genuine progress toward a humane world ever be made. The humane world to come will be egalitarian, libertarian, and fraternal, not hierarchical and anti-democratic. It will be a world at peace, not because of the cessation of hostilities is imposed upon belligerents by force majeure, but because reason has replaced fully unreason as the prevailing guide in human affairs. It must be a world ruled by the democratic principle that the welfare of each person is the concern of all people, even as the welfare of all people is the concern of each person. It will be the world of which liberal religion has dreamed throughout the ages, but you and I will not live to see it come. Our function, our role in the unending historical process of humanity seeking to humanize itself and thereby to humanize the world, is to keep the dream and the ideal alive in the minds of people until the present age of shadows, I would say darkness, is gone. We of the liberal religious movements are few and we are weak. We must learn together the meaning of commitment and mutual obligation, so that in spite of our small numbers and our lack of power, we can continue to work toward the day of humankind that we envision. Above all else, we must learn how to pass our vision on to our children and other young people, so that they in their turn may have the will to carry on further. For we do not know and cannot know how long it will be before the night of obscurantism is ended and the new day of humankind dawns. And we must not permit ourselves the luxury of a fragmented liberalism. We must not split with those who are on the same side for picayune and trivial reasons. For our history teaches us that this is the besetting sin of liberals. We must remember and teach our children to remember that, as Howard Nemerov once wrote, the ideas one thinks of are of altogether less importance than the ideas one thinks with. These ideas we think with, we share with fellow liberals. We must not break with them because there are differences in the ideas we think of. It would be pretentious to say that the future lies entirely in our hands. We are too few for that, but we can at least serve to keep alive the gleam in the age of gloom. 'Tis the season. 'Tis the season. Thank you.
Dr. LaRue.
This is the moment to break for refreshments and dialogue. If you have anything to say, save it for after.
So before you break the basic
The year. And one of the things I was trying to do was focus on our individual responsibilities. Now, has anyone picked up anything that said, yeah, but, which is the great question. I enjoyed what you said, yeah, but. Anybody got any yeah, buts or any questions you want to ask? Yes, Paul.
Just on gift giving. I was driving to work the other day, and it was windy. Remember the wind? And at a fruit stand, an umbrella had blown up in the air and into the traffic lane on Centinela, down where it doesn't exist anymore in Jefferson. And the cars started bottlenecking and slowly going around, and one guy stopped his car, got out, took the umbrella, brought it back to the fruit stand, and stuck it somewhere where it wasn't going to be a problem. And everyone, I guess in their small, very fast way, was grateful that they could now move very, very quickly. But nobody let him go back to his car. He was the hero, and he, in his generosity and his humanity, had given this gift of free flow to everyone. But there was no thank you in as much as letting him get back to his car. His car was there. It was a different obstacle, but at least it was a car, not an umbrella, which might scratch your car if you passed it. And it reminded me about how gifts always seem to be an exchange, and they're not. Someone once said the best form of generosity, the best way to give a gift is anonymously. And this gentleman had given a gift to everyone, and in many ways it remained anonymous because no one acknowledged it, and the drivers who were 3 cars back didn't even know who would suddenly relieve the problem. And here was this man standing in the wind and the rain on the side, waiting to get back to his car, having given free flow to everyone else. And it just made me think about the concept of what is a gift.
Gift giving, and of course at this time of the year, particularly in the Christian tradition, is both, has some bad overtones. I have no objection to people saying, I appreciate you and I care about you and I've been saving up to surprise you with this and so on. And I have no objection to the wide-eyed wonderment of little kids when they go down there and see the miracle of transformation with parcels under the tree and so on. But there are dangers. One is, that I mentioned, was greed. We begin to anticipate and want, and you have these kids climbing up on Santa's lap, or as they do in Spain, they climb up on the laps. They have the 3 wise men will be sitting in a store window, and you'll have one is always black, because that's one of the traditions of the Spanish church, that one wise man is black. The kids choose the wise man that they think probably give them the best deal and ask him for what they want for their goodies. But it can be an act of generosity. I don't think when you give a gift, you should need to be thanked. I think this then becomes greed on the part of the other person. It's nice to be thanked. It's nice to be appreciated. But I don't think it has to be. Our concern has to be, or should be, the bringing out of that which is best in the other. So if you give a gift and you get a thank you, the thank you will bring out the best in you. You'll feel appreciated, loved, adored, and all that sort of thing. But if you give the gift not expecting anything, then you've done your thing, and maybe you can bring out through the gift the best in others. What you do, you see, once you move into this kind of thinking, you move away from the junk people buy at the last minute. What am I going to give Uncle Dudley? You know, give him that poinsettia, or give him something. You know, you get things for people who really don't care. Many families right now are moving away from gift giving entirely. They're killing it because they say this is a burden, it's a bore. At the same time, if you care about somebody and you want to make an expression, of course it doesn't have to be this time of the year, there's nothing wrong with it. It depends how the gift is given and how it's received, and that's what you're talking about. The guy did a nice thing. It was nice. The cops do it all the time. They get out and they sweep up. You see a cop with a broom out there sweeping up the glass off the freeway, where some guy's crashed into the other. I don't know where he's got the broom, but he apparently has one, and he cleans the glass off so the traffic is not tied up. We do things. You go along at the university campus and some idiot's throwing his pop can or whatever on the side. You pick it up and throw it in the trash because this is your world. And all you're doing is filling your commitment as a human being to make the world a little more livable for somebody else. Too bad people weren't generous enough to let him get back to his car. Anyone else got something to throw into the bouillabaisse? Yes, sir.
That's a beautiful saying. The thing crowns itself, not the things.
That's a good point. That's very true. Yes?
I like to address myself a little bit to the feeling of loneliness, especially during a season of festivity. I was very happy to see the young group singing and working together, planning to meet, and a feeling of togetherness among them. And I feel among the older group, it used to exist. I remember during Rick's time, we never had anyone who was, whether there was a couple or one alone, where we knew that this party was alone and we would leave them alone during the time of a holiday. Like yesterday, like all during the last 2 weeks, like most of us, got cards and letters from far away nearby. And we got a very nice card, which upset me greatly, from a couple who has been many times at our home, who never will take the trouble to call, to say, let's get together for a coffee, let's do this. You have done it so many, many times for us in the past. Now that's more difficult for you. Maybe let's do something. And I wish they wouldn't have sent me that card because it aroused my anger.
Yes.
It brought it to the surface what I felt, and I liked them. But I feel maybe...
You're hurt.
Yes, I'm hurt.
Right. What you're talking about is it's something that's very interesting that your President Paul raised this. We were talking up at the front here. He said, okay, our young people's group is now going. They have their own president and so on. It's time for us to start other groups for the older, that was his next group, and for the unmarried couples. And I think you're touching on something very real. And you're not the first person who spoke to me about this today. I've got a couple of people who have mentioned the isolation. One of the things about aging is I can think of a whole lot of rotten things to say because I had some friends who told me how rotten it is, you know. But is the loss that goes with it. First, loss of energy. Get these people up here, doing their thing, full of beans. There was a time you could have done this. Perhaps you two probably could still. But the point is, you don't. So you begin to conserve your energy, and you don't phone up and say, let's go out for coffee, because you can say, oh, we can sit home and drink coffee. What the heck? You don't invite somebody in, because that means work. You've got to get dishes out and all the rest of this stuff. Although I was at 2 gatherings yesterday, and they don't use dishes anymore. Everything's plastic plates. I love it. You have all the beautiful setting plastic plates. Why not? You have a big plastic bag, you throw them in, and it's done. But it's work. And people it's a conservation of energy. The other thing is the loss of family and friends. One person told me that person that she had roomed with for a long time is leaving. She's now being reduced in her apartment to 1 room, a bath, and a little kitchenette, and so on. Lonely, isolated, and so on. This has to be a concern. It has to be a concern of the Ethical Culture Society, because we are concerned people. And I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. It has to lie with individuals who reach out and touch. We had the very beautiful gathering out at your house, out in Camarillo. It was warm, it was crazy, it was fun, it was exciting. And that was neat. We need these kinds of things. And this is not enough just here, because the days grind on, and they go on, and they on, and on. So what do we do? Daisy, what do you want to do? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I would see happening like a potluck, like a few people get together during these holidays, New Year's, even the Jewish New Year is very hard for me.
Sure.
Because we always have a lot of people together. And even a potluck, come together and we share and we sit and maybe some interesting things we talk about.
Have you got the energy and time to set one up?
Not right at this moment.
Okay. But you'd like to see that happen?
Yes.
Okay, that's something for ethical to think about. Anyone else? Paul?
There was a potluck just last month.
I know. Yeah, well, this is what we're talking about. Any other comment on the season to be whatever? Jolly?
I was curious, do the Scandinavians have a different history to the crazy days?
No, well, they have a different St. Nicholas kind of tradition, but every culture has its own.
Maybe before the Christian era.
Oh, yeah, they all, I'm not sure of the Scandinavian, I haven't gone into the folklore there, but almost all the cultures, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, were very much concerned about the transition of the solstice. And they had one god or another coming into power, mythology that goes along with it. But I haven't checked on that in the solstice observations prior to becoming Christian. See, what happened is we adopted a lot of things. The Christmas tree comes out of the worship of the oak. And apparently, according to one tradition, some people say it came out of Egypt, but the tradition I'm familiar with is that St. Boniface was into Germany, the Black Forest, and was trying to convert the German people to Christianity. He found that they worship centered around an oak tree. And so in a moment of bravery, he took axes and cut the thing down, which horrified them. And then he said, I will tell you of a God that lasts forever. And he cut down an evergreen and said, the oak dies and revives, and our God is constantly with you, and this sort of thing. And that's supposed to be the beginning of the oak tree. The candles, or as we have now, electric lights on the trees, are supposed to have come from Martin Luther, pardon me, who apparently put lights or candles on the tree to tell his children, after he, apart from the priesthood, and married, about the lights that shone when Jesus was born, and so on. We have traditions that accumulate. Sometimes the real true origins are lost in the midst of this time. We take pieces, and we adapt. And the foods are the most wonderful thing. As you know, right at Hanukkah, we have Jewish foods that are special from Russia from Hanukkah, or from Spain from Hanukkah, depending on which culture you come from. The same is true for Christianity. And I was with a bunch of Greeks, and all they had was Greek
Christmas food was great. I was with a bunch of people with Spanish background, and they had Mexican food. Yesterday was a stuffed day. I mean, it was awful, but it was great. Paul?
What recommendation would you have for people who are not with family? Let's say that they're here from another country and they're not with family, and this is a time where, just like gift giving seems to be something that's imposed upon our society, lowercase s, so is being with family. And sometimes when everyone runs off to his or her family, there are those for whom there isn't anybody, or they might be, let's say, back in France.
Or sometimes they don't want to be with their family because they moved away from them. Their thinking and their background. Well, all you can do as individuals, concerned people, is open your door and say, come on in. One more mouth to feed is no big deal. You know, that kind of thing. I got one of these things that's down about here. It tickles.
Would you like some juice?
Jews or Christians, I'm not sure. I think it's all put away, is it not? Would you get me one, Santa Claus?
Yeah.
No, I've got Santa Claus. She's going to get me one. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on the feeling that it begins with the individual. It's very hard sometimes in this world to feel that you really can make a change, that one person really does something. And although there have been precedents set within our lifetime, I mean, I think the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement is certainly proof that enough one people saying something becomes a group, becomes a force. But that's a political movement, and it's hard to relate it individually. And I can only use my story, my own story, to say that it's proof that if one person does something. When we decided to get married, we came to ethical culture. We come from different faiths, and we wanted to declare the love that we had for each other within a set of values that we believed in. And it's sort of drawing that larger circle. Ethical culture took us both in, and the faiths that we came from. And that's where we thought it would end. We thought it would be the two of us having a lovely marriage that would be shared with our family, Dr. Larue, and the concepts of ethical culture. But because of our involvement in going to meet with Dr. Larue and then coming to ethical culture, I found out about the Action Adults, and we found out about Para los Niños. And so I went back to my place of work, where there's certainly a feeling of greed that overrides the season, and everyone's worried about their bonus and how much is going to be spent on the Christmas party. And I spoke to one of my co-workers who wanted to get involved with children, and so I introduced her to Sylvie. And last week, we managed to get 5 people together from my place of work to go to Para los Niños. And this started with myself and John getting together to get married, and what came out of it was 5 other people who had never heard of ethical culture, who didn't know about Para los Niños, and there we were downtown, and we took a group of, I guess it was about 80 or 100 children to the police academy, huddled in on the school buses, 2 school buses. I haven't been on one of those for a long time. And there were 100 kids who realized that someone cared about them. And they got to the police academy, and there were gifts, and there were policemen who were being friendly. They didn't see them as forces of overriding power or loss of rights or anything. They were just nice people helping them. And they got toys, there's no question about it, and and McDonald's, and they were really happy with that. But through them, that grows, and it's just like that stone. And so
That's right.
in this season, it's hard to understand that just being one person, it doesn't end with you, that it does have an effect. So
That's beautiful.
not to lose hope.
Thank you. That's a great. See, this is what we don't hear about. You drop the stone, and you don't always watch where the waves go, and that power goes up. Now, what happens? I don't know what happened with any of those kids at Para los Niños, but if one child changes the attitude about being responsible to law, justice, fair play, all of these things, that's all that matters. But if 10 do it, it's that much stronger. But 80 kids given a new opportunity, a new view on life, a new attitude towards the police force, which in their ideal is to serve, to aid to serve, or whatever they have on their police car. That kind of concept, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Her husband-to-be is a heck of a neat guy. Yes? Dorothy?
Oh, me?
Yes,
Oh,
dear.
I had an interesting experience many, many years ago. I don't know how many of you have ever read the Peterkin Papers by Edward Everett Hale. It's the story of a family living in somewhere in New England, and all kinds of things happen to them, and whenever they're in a quandary, they always ask the lady from Philadelphia what to do, and she tells them what to do. And one Christmas, they bought a Christmas tree, and they put it up in the living room, and the tree was too tall for the room, so they cut a hole in the ceiling, and the Christmas tree was accommodated. And I read this, and then one summer I was in summer stock in Rhode Island, and we rented the Hale house for the company to live in, and I had the room above with the raised thing like so. They didn't repair the ceiling, they just put a box up over. So I often think of that at Christmas time. And another thing that doesn't have to do with Christmas was that they ordered a piano, and the piano was delivered, only it was too big to get through the door, so they left it on the piazza, on the porch that ran around the house, and they faced it towards the house. It was a huge piano, and they asked the lady from Philadelphia what to do, and she said, raise the window and play it from inside.
Oh, that's
I love it. Whenever you doubt the possibilities, either in creative storytelling or in action of the ethical culture, you ought to attend one of these meetings when we unplug this and the genies start coming out. Anyone else got something to throw into the Christmas stew? Yes, sir.
I'll just throw in a quick thing. The early part of the week, Arlene told me that at work, where she works downtown, the building owned by the LA Times, as a matter of fact, and that the management was going to bring in turkeys for everybody as their little Christmas bonus or whatever. And she mentioned that a guy at work that I had met is going to, he said he's going to bring his turkey down to the Mission. And she said, I think I'll do that too. The next thing I heard, which was, I guess, yesterday, basically everybody took their turkeys down to the Mission. Nobody kept them. Even management.
Again, the stone drops, the thing goes out, the idea catches, and transformation takes place. And perhaps somebody will feel a little better about the world because this happened. Congratulations. Yes, Paul?
This is on the minus side about the LA mission, just something which is a little bit of concern. Action Adults did help out at the LA mission, but I thought that there was what I would call more than meets the eye, which bothered me, and I just wanted to express that. It was interesting that on the New York Times there was a photo of 3 celebrities. There's Joanne Woodward, a guy whose name escapes me, and Joanne Worley, and next to Joanne Worley was Carrot, but she wasn't in the LA Times photo. The only ones that they showed were the celebrities.
Right.
And
They missed the real one.
in speaking to the people who were there, some alcoholics said that they wanted to get rehabilitated, but in order to be accepted in the program, they had to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior.
Right.
And therefore, they weren't rehabilitated. One tried to push his Bible back, thinking his Bible to carry. He didn't want it, and it got a little messy. And when the workers were done, they got a letter of thanks from the LA Mission for being good Christians. Instead of the fact that maybe these people did it just like people gave turkeys,
Right.
out of the goodness of their hearts and out of being people, being humans, everything was because you believe in Jesus, because you're a good Christian. And I felt that was, personally, put a damper on it.
Well, no, it doesn't put a damper on it, but you send a little note saying there are others there and so on. This business of, you remember I introduced the concept of the of the secular sobriety group to you. That is taking off. I have a bundle of letters, I thought I'd brought them along, from Jim Christopher shared with me from all across the nation. He wrote a small article in Free Inquiry, and the response of this from people who had been looking for help and who could not take this statement of belief in the supreme power or in Jesus or whatever, and were grateful with, from doctors who are alcoholics, from lawyers who are alcoholics and so on, who want this kind of a program. And the other thing is, now we've got a couple of groups that are putting a little money into it, so his advertising is moving out. He's now being locked into a hospital group, and this thing is starting to take off as an alternative to Alcoholics Anonymous. Not a replacement, but an alternative program. And again, here is a man who started with his own particular weakness or disease, or however you want to call it, and who began to work out ways that he could help others, and now it's become a whole movement from Alaska right down to Florida. He's getting material. And I think this is exciting and wonderful. And again, inasmuch as any of you are interested, I'll give you his address. I did publish it one time here. And if you want to do anything to help him, he's a neat guy. He's a beautiful person, beautiful human being. He's now, I'm writing an introduction to the book he's just written. Just got the manuscript, so I'll have to read it. I haven't read it yet. On the secular sobriety thing. This thing has a possibility. Again, it's a humanistic, an ethical humanistic outreach. And that's important. And I don't know where that's going to land, what puddle that'll land in, and send out its way. Yeah.
I think we should make it a regular feature of our Sunday talk to announce what will happen at the next meeting, and we haven't today, so in keeping with what's going on here today, we will be addressed at our first meeting in January by Mr. Richard Larson, who is Chief Legal Counsel for the Mexican American Defense and Educational Fund. Mr. Larson is largely involved in problems of individuals who are caught up in the immigration law and families are being separated by virtue of the stringent requirements of this. For those of you who are interested in an explanation of this and a consideration of the ethics of the new immigration law, please be here to hear Mr. Larson, who sounds like a very concerned and humanistic person over the telephone to me.
I really wish you'd done that when I called for announcements, because we had one person here who would have been very, Caron is very interested in this, and I'm sure he could have brought others along with him. But perhaps he's on your mailing list.
But be aware that we should have really an exciting time listening to him, because he's on the firing line trying to get humane treatment for people who otherwise are threatened with separation within families.
That's great. Anyone else? Then I'm going to turn you all free to go out and drop stones in puddles and light lights and do things. Have a happy, happy season and a real good transition into the new year.
You too.
Thank you.